Okay, here we are in front of the U.S. mission to the United Nations. Inner City Press on the case. We've been ousted from the UN now for 98 days. Nikki Haley did nothing, and now we can report, or repeat. Axios has reported, New York Times as well, that Nikki Haley has resigned. Now, the Times story, which I just read, implies that it's a fit of principle. Maybe it is, maybe it is. What I know is that one of the principles is not the First Amendment, because for 98 days, Inner City Press, for covering U.S. corruption, UN corruption, USUN corruption, has stood in front of that gate there, and at least 3 times said to Nikki Haley, hey, I was beaten up by UN security and thrown in the street, and now I can't go to the noon briefing anymore. Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo le va? Bueno, aquí estoy. Me tiraron a la calle. Me tiraron, no a la calle, pero no puedo entrar al building. No está corrupto. Y yo estoy peleando para reentrar. Yo voy a reentrar. Un día yo vengo ahí para buscarle una soda, una sodita.
Está bien.
Yo estoy, casi todas las mañanas estoy aquí haciendo preguntas a los embajadores. Todavía estoy haciendo 10 artículos por día, no me importa. Pero esa gente son corruptos. Todo está bien, todo está bien.
María,
Sí, muy bien.
Arriba?
Sí, sí. Déjeme seguir. Ya la embajadora se está quitando el trabajo también.
Primero Dios,
Ya.
usted entra.
Okay,
Yo
muy
voy
bien.
a hablar para que usted-
Gracias. Okay, well, here we are on the perimeter. I wish we could say it's breaking news. Now, can we get to the bottom of it? We're going to have to go Michael Moore style. Nikki Haley, she pulled the plug, or the plug was pulled. Does she plan to run against the Trumpster? Look at that photo. Look. It was so recent. So recent it was. Look at them. Look at the 3 of them together. Nikki Haley, Antonio Guterres, the corrupt one, and Trumpists. Look. And those days are gone. Those days are over. Look. On the wall. Trump, Pence, Pompeo, Nikki Haley. Now, let's see. You know, I could Axios and the New York Times be wrong? They could. Did any of this have to do? Neither story mentions Crew, Citizens for Ethics, which filed a complaint on October 8th, which would be yesterday, about impermissible use of private flights. Then again, the New York Times piece says this was discussed earlier, implying that it might even have something to do with Kavanaugh. No one knows. No one knows. But it's a big change. If it's a new day at the UN, and the only thing new about this day is the beating up of a journalist, if it's a new day at the UN, ask yourself, why take off so quickly? We hardly knew ye. From this building to that building. One individual is gone. What about Guterres? What about Guterres? What about the man who threw a journalist in the street for reporting on his son's business? How many private flights did the Guter take? Nobody knows. We're staying on the perimeter here. It's fine. They've got very high security at the U.S. mission. I'm an American journalist, beaten up by the UN. Thoughts on Haley? It's a complicated story. I'd hoped that she would be a disruptor. And sometimes she was. I think it frightened some people in the same way Trump does, like you just never knew what she would do. But after a while, I did know that she would do. Nothing for Cameroon, nothing about UN censorship, nothing at all. A lot of waste of money. She lives 1 block away in a $58,000 a month apartment and still would show up here on this corner, shutting down all traffic with two vehicles. So, and so it is. Nikki Haley has resigned. Nikki Haley has resigned. All right, maybe we'll do some man on the street interviews. Let's check it out. Maybe we can get to the bottom of this one. Nobody knows. We could be in the bike lane. Uh-oh, they've got the spaghetti ears in. We'll see. Will Nikki show up with her massive security detail? Now, I always liked Nikki more than her team. Okay, I've asked Nikki about Cameroon. The first time she said, sure, she's not adverse to a meeting, but there was no follow-through. And when the Cameroonian American Council came to this building and met, they met with some guy who knew nothing. Nothing. Absolute disrespect. But to me, the thing I know most personally is the failure to act, the absolute failure to act on UN censorship. This thing was in Fox News twice, okay? July 5th and sometime in August, early August, before Alison Smale dropped the hammer without a single bit of due process. She didn't even have to say she liked Inner City Press. All she had to say is, you can't throw out an investigative journalist without a hearing. Didn't say it. Repeatedly raised there at the bus stop towards then spokesman John DeGory, who may stay with whoever the next ambassador is. To John DeGory, it was raised. He said, I understand. Understand what? I was unable to cover the UN General Assembly week unlike Saudi journalists, now they're going to, very concerned about Jamal Khashoggi. BS, an American new day at the UN. It's not a new day at the UN. Or it is a new day, and the new day is a corrupt Secretary General who has the press beaten up and thrown in the street and covers up openly. Exactly. Who will be the new Nikki Haley? That'll be interesting. Somebody lower profile, higher profile? Will Nikki run in 2020? If it's true, if she's got Maggie Haberman writing the story that she's quitting out of principle, is this a setup? Will Susan Rice run for senator in Maine and Nikki Haley take on the Trumpster? Will Trumpster not run in 2020? Watch this space. We're here in front of the U.S. mission, and it looks like, since the U.S. mission under Nikki Haley did nothing about UN censorship, looks like we'll be here for a while more. To be continued. Okay, here we are. It's Tuesday, October 9th. This is the United Nations. The U.S. mission to the United Nations. In the news, Nikki Haley has resigned. Supposedly there's some kind of a meeting in D.C. of Trump and Haley to make an announcement about his good friend Haley, possible running opponent, at 10:30. But we've decided to go live here in front of the UN, where we've been working on this very sidewalk for 98 days since we were evicted and ousted for covering the UN's corruption. Yes, I'm sure there will be. It's going to be, I'm juggling here. If I could sit in my bus stop office. Nikki Haley has resigned. Resignation of Nikki Haley. There, the Russian deputy. He's quite a tweeter. He's extremely active on Twitter. No reaction. He's a cards extremely close to his chest. The fact that inner city press has been moldering. Let's turn it around. Proof of the pudding. There's no moldering here. I'm a journalist. I just happen to have been thrown out by the UN for covering the corruption of Antonio Guterres. Now, are you ready? I was actually just speaking to somebody, a journalist, a fellow journalist who called me. So let's keep it live this way. Let's keep it live this way. Why do I think she resigned? Now, no one can prove it. Maybe even her. The New York Times implies that she resigned in a fit of principle. Other people, cynics, would say perhaps she resigned. I'm trying to get the angle right. There we go. I've got a Chinese face here too. That could be. Others have said she may have resigned so she can run for office against Trump in 2020. Now, there was also an ethics filing by Citizens for Ethics about use of private planes to fly to South Carolina, but she could probably do correctly because she's defended Trump repeatedly at the UN. And I'm saying this without rancor or you got to stick to some principles. And I would have thought, believe it or not, that one of any U.S. ambassadors, but particularly one of this administration, well, not of this administration, freedom of the press to cover UN corruption should have been one of her principles, and it was not. I can say, on personal knowledge, I personally said to her, and while I was in the UN, I asked her questions about Cameroon and the need for a FOIA and sexual abuse by peacekeepers, and she said all the right things, and I went out of my way to say, like, she's going to be a disruptor, but nothing has been disrupted. Nothing has been improved at the UN. It's all sizzle and no steak. Praise the Secretary General who's stealing money to go to his home, does business in Africa through his son. Praise the Secretary General through a journalist in the street. Had many losses in the General Assembly, 150 to 1 for no purpose. So, I don't know. Who will come next? Who will be the next U.S. ambassador? Now that'll be interesting. Maybe a true disruptor. This place needs to be disrupted, that I can say. When you have a Secretary General that's as corrupt as this one, you cannot have a U.S. ambassador that's just colluding in mutual self-praise. We're going to start another one. We got to see if there's a Trump speech. To be continued. Maybe we can also get some ambassador ones. You saw the Russian ambassador. No reaction at all. Yeah, well, I think that she's... Oh, actually, wait. Thanks for this one comment, because I think nothing has been accomplished by the U.S. mission at the UN in the last year that she's been here. But maybe this is the time to pull the plug, because the longer you stay, the more people are going to ask, okay, where is the reform? It needs to be disrupted, and it was not. She held a 4th of July thing here with the connivance of every ambassador. She wanted to say, look, I'm a good diplomat. It was an incoherent strategy. She said she was taking names. What names were taken? What names were taken? If you sidle up to the most corrupt Secretary General. That's the name you should have taken. I gave that name to the 17th Precinct. Antonio Guterres and Ronald Dobbins. Corrupt. To be continued.